What's going on, YouTube fam, and welcome back to another video. And today we're going to be talking about 5 things you may not like about Mexico. Now, disclaimer, this is not a video to talk negatively about Mexico, to throw shade, to throw spite, anything like that. I live in Mexico. I've been here for almost 3 years. I'm a resident. I love this country. Always loved Mexican culture my whole life. This is not meant to be a hit piece on Mexico, okay? So let me get that out the way first. This is meant to be informative, to give you a few tips, well, not necessarily tips, but a few tidbits of information of things that, depending on what country you come from, you may not be used to. Now, if you're from Latin America, or you come from a Latin American family, or you travel around Latin America, spend some time, then this can apply to some other countries that you've been to too, because many countries, most of them, have similar ways of life. Now, we're going to talk about 5 things, and this can get you prepared if you're going to visit Mexico, if you're going to spend extended time in Mexico, and if you want to move here. They're not necessarily bad things. Every country has a different system of how things work. So this is just getting you prepared and letting you know, hey, it's kind of not the greatest thing, but the good outweighs the bad in this country. So let's get into the number 1 next. Now, these are in no particular order, okay? So we'll just start with number 1, and then we will break down the 5 lists. Let's go. All right, so the first one we're going to talk about is noise. Yes, noise. Now, I lived in many different cities that are very noisy. New York City, where I come from, I lived in São Paulo, Brazil for 3 years, 12 million people. A lot of noise happens, and when I say noise, I mean, it really depends. Now, I'm going to throw a few things there. Noise meaning it could be noise if you're living in a big city, right? Like I live in Guadalajara, the second biggest city. Depending on where you live in the city, you can hear a lot of traffic noises, a lot of different, sounds of the city, people talking loudly. That's another thing that you may find. It's cultural. You may hear people throwing parties up till late night, and most people aren't really too bothered about it. It's a part of life here. Mexicans are very passionate people, like to have fun, and some are just, that's just how it is. That's just how it is. Especially in bigger Mexican cities like Mexico City, Guadalajara, Monterrey, you're going to hear more noise than usual. So if you're a person that doesn't really care too much for noise, maybe consider a smaller town or try to find a neighborhood with the least noise ratio possible. So for example, I'll give you one. Here in Guadalajara, when the garbage man comes, and I've noticed this in different areas, they'll ring a cowbell, right? So it could be any time in the morning, whatever, you'll hear a cowbell ringing, and you're like, what is that? Was it a cowbell? What is it? No, it's the garbage man coming to let people know, hey, we're here, so this is your last chance to put the garbage on the street. So it could be a little bit annoying sometimes, and you may hear like random sirens or random little noises from people selling things. So that, it's not the biggest deal in the world, but if you're really sensitive to noise, and, especially being a big city like Guadalajara, for example, or Mexico City, or any of these big cities in Mexico, it may be unfavorable, okay? So just keep that in mind. I mean, it's not out of control. For example, the neighborhood I live in Guadalajara, is very quiet, very safe neighborhood. And I hear a little bit of noise, but most of the time, like Saturday, Sunday, and holidays, you don't hear a peep. You can hear a pin drop on the road, all right? So it's not all negative, and it's not noisy all the time, all right? So let's get into number 2 next. Okay, so number 2, we're going to talk about punctuality. Yes, punctuality. Now, this is not unique to Mexico. This is something that is very common within Latin America, whether it be Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Brazil, Panama, Costa Rica, wherever in Latin America, in most Latin American countries, the notion of time is very relaxed. Now, of course, for business purposes, that is more of a punctual, people arrive on time, because of course, time is money. But when you're talking about punctuality and in terms of you making plans with someone, whether it's a formal or informal thing, you could say, okay, we're going to meet at 5 p.m. at this place or whatever. Sometimes they'll arrive on time, most times they won't, and it's a part of the culture. So don't get offended by it. It can be a little bit frustrating, I understand that. I come from the United States where, we're a very punctual Western country. It's a part of the culture. I've been to Germany, Sweden, Nordic countries in Europe, that they're very on time with everything, like meetings with friends, everything. People show up at the designated time. So if you're from Latin America, I know I'm preaching to the choir, or if you spend time in Latin America, I know I'm preaching to the choir because you've experienced this. So just know that if you make plans, whether it's to go on a date with someone that you're seeing or to meet up with friends, friends or something informal, they may not always arrive on time. You make a plan for 9, they'll show up at 9:15. Sometimes they'll let you know, sometimes they won't, because they're used to that. So they don't always think about what foreigners will think. It's just a part of the culture. So not the worst thing in the world. So don't let it frustrate you. I just find myself to be punctual most times. Sometimes I'm late because, things happen sometimes. But overall, I'm a very punctual person. But I don't take it personal because I spent a lot of time in Latin America in different countries. So I know that's how things go, okay? So just know that punctuality, don't expect it in informal situations. Sometimes you will be surprised. Sometimes you'll show up early. But if you're invited to a party, for example, and let's say, we're going to start around 9. You can show up like 9:30, 9:45, 10. It is no big deal because then when people start to get there and then things really start to get fun, okay? So if you're, a time freak, like, gosh, right now, we agreed to 9 p.m., you're not here, then you may not like living in Mexico. But business purposes, I would say yes. Now, one thing about the punctuality thing, with the internet service, they will give you a certain time. So if you get internet service, if you're planning on living here, they're going to give you 2 time slots for the day. It's going to be 9 between 2 or 4 between 7. And the same thing with water deliveries, because I get water delivered. The water deliveries don't give you a specific time. You can select a day. You just kind of have to wait around for it. So just know that. And also with the internet thing, they'll be, we'll be there. And they may show up earlier or later. It's just a thing where you have to have patience. All right. So not the end of the world, but just another thing that may be a little bit annoying to some people that you may get used to if you're not used to it already. So let's jump into number 3. Number 3, long waiting times. All right. Long waiting times. Now, when I talk about long waiting times, in general, not for every situation. We could talk about a famous, like a really popular restaurant or a bar, of course, that's around the world. But if you're doing things that involve like business, for example, if you need to go to the bank, you may need to wait, depending on what you're doing. You take a number, you're seated, and you wait for them to call your number. Now, even if you go into the bank and there's only a few people, it still may take time depending on what the other people that are before you are doing. So just prepare yourself, give yourself a window of time if you need to actually sit and wait and speak to a bank representative or a teller. So that's just one aspect. If you're going to go pay your electric bill at CFE, which is the national carrier, I mean, you could do it at OXXO, you could do it online. But if you're doing these types of business, business dealings in person, there's going to be long wait times. Prepare yourself for that. It's just the way things go. Even when you're getting your residency and doing legal paperwork, you have to have patience because it's just, there's so many steps involved and you may have to go back, sit down, wait, go back, So just make sure you give yourself enough time to get these tasks done. Don't do it when you're in a time crunch. Now, sometimes they can go snappy, but I wouldn't count on it for most times. It's just how it is here, okay? So long waiting times for banks and business dealings and certain things like that. And hey, it's a different country than what you're used to. And maybe you're from a country that has the same thing. So that's just one more thing to be aware of. So let's jump into number 4. All right, so number 4, we're gonna talk about bureaucracy. Now, if you're doing business, different things, especially related to government work, expect a lot of bureaucracy. Expect you having to return to immigration several times. Even if you have everything in order, they may not have your documents ready. Expect to be taking on multiple steps and doing multiple things for something that seems very simple on the surface. And, in Latin America, it's very common. When I lived in Brazil, I dealt with the same things. It's just step after step for things that you feel that are so simple. But then again, you're like, okay, well, yes, this is how it is here. So bureaucracy, especially with government, like I'm saying, with government situations, whenever you have to deal with immigration, things of that nature, bureaucracy is going to be a little bit of pain. So just expect that. And, there's a lot of, I'm from the United States. We have bureaucracy in certain things. It's just certain systems run more efficiently. It goes back to the cultural thing and the way things are set up. So things can be very bureaucratic, even getting an apartment. So have patience with that. That can be very bureaucratic. They're going to require all kinds of things. If you haven't checked out my video about how to get an apartment in Mexico, check that out. That'll give you an insight to what that's like. But that's also a very bureaucratic process and can involve the government depending on what your situation and immigration status is here, okay? So that's one thing to expect. And let's get into the last one, number 5. Okay, so let's talk about number 5, and that is service, okay? Now, I'm gonna broaden this and talk about hospitality. Now, there's many good establishments here that have great service, great hospitality here in Mexico. And there's some that just don't meet what you would expect, even if it's at a place where you think it's gonna be better. So, you may have a situation where you're out, you order several drinks when you're in a group, only 2 drinks come for whatever reason. And I can tell you the reason of this and what I've experienced. A lot of people here, they'll hire younger, maybe like college students, like early 20s, and they don't really have a lot of experience in hospitality. And, the place is so busy, maybe the training isn't adequate, but it could be a little bit frustrating. This is not the majority, but this is something that's common depending on where you go. Of course, the higher end the establishment, the better service you're gonna get, but you can get good service in your everyday mom and pop place. Just depends on where you're going. Really, it's a crapshoot, okay? Now, just expect that. So when you come here and you're like, oh yeah, I ordered that how long ago? And you had to remind people, that usually happens with the younger crowd that don't have that much experience in hospitality. So with that being said, just know that service may not be good. It can be maybe customer service at a supermarket or Walmart or something like that. It's just maybe it's a lack of training. Maybe it's the way they train them. Being young, you're just like, you don't have the experience. You're just like, oh, whatever. So that can be kind of a pain as well. But that being said, those 5 things are not to deter you from coming to Mexico. That's to prepare you for coming to Mexico if you don't know Latin America and if you haven't been around this type of culture, all right? So with that being said, come to Mexico. This place is fantastic. You're gonna like it, I promise, all right? So the next video I'm gonna be dropping is 5 things you're gonna love about Mexico. So that's all positivity, okay? And this one, like I said, didn't mean to be negative, but just to be informative. So that takes care of today's video, you all. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate all of you that subscribe, all of you that hit the like and leave comments. Leave a comment, I'll respond to you, I promise. Leave a like, all that stuff helps. Even if you just watch and you don't do anything else, that still helps. So thank you all right? Well, it's Friday. I'm going to have a little fun, not too much fun because I got stuff to do early tomorrow. But you all have a great weekend, great week. Stay safe, and I'll catch you soon in the next video. Peace.